this speaker, megaphone, this bullhorn. So I said, well, what the hell? They're cut off. They're probably starving. And, well, let's give them a treat.
At 99 years old, Mel Brooks has nothing left to prove and nothing left to hide. After nearly a century of comedy, controversy, friendships, and feuds, the legendary filmmaker has finally begun speaking more openly about the people who shaped his life behind the scenes. And one name in particular has sparked renewed curiosity: Rob Reiner. To the public, Brooks and Reiner have long appeared united by laughter, shared politics, and Hollywood history. They were often seen as two sides of the same creative coin: outspoken, influential, and deeply rooted in American entertainment. But those who worked around them knew the relationship was never as simple as it appeared. Beneath the jokes and public appearances were moments of tension, ideological clashes, and personal disappointment that were carefully kept out of the spotlight. For decades, Mel Brooks avoided addressing any friction. He preferred humor over honesty, deflection over confrontation. But with age comes reflection. And at 99, Brooks has begun reframing the past with clarity rather than comedy. In rare interviews and recollections, his tone has shifted. The laughter remains, but it now carries weight. What really happened between Mel Brooks and Rob Reiner? Was it creative rivalry, political distance, or something far more personal? And why did Brooks wait this long to speak openly about it? This isn't a story about hatred or scandal. It's about truth, boundaries, and the quiet unraveling of respect between two giants of Hollywood, told in a moment when legacy matters more than image. Mel Brooks and Rob Reiner come from two different generations of Hollywood, but their paths crossed in ways that made comparison inevitable. Brooks was already a towering figure in comedy long before Reiner stepped behind the camera. By the time Reiner was establishing himself as a filmmaker and political voice, Brooks had written, directed, and redefined satire across decades. Yet, despite this imbalance in experience, their relationship was often framed as one of equals, an assumption that quietly strained the dynamic. In the early years, Brooks admired Reiner's confidence and clarity of vision. Reiner represented a new kind of Hollywood power: outspoken, politically active, and unafraid to blur entertainment with ideology. Brooks, though equally opinionated, came from a generation that used comedy as camouflage. He believed humor should sneak truths into the room, not announce them. This philosophical difference planted the first seeds of tension. Privately, Brooks was known to bristle at what he viewed as moral posturing in the industry. While he respected Reiner's success, he struggled with the way certain voices began positioning themselves as arbiters of correctness. According to those close to Brooks, he believed comedy should challenge authority, not become it. As Reiner's public persona grew louder, Brooks became more reserved, preferring to let his work speak rather than his politics. This distance was subtle at first. There were fewer collaborations, fewer public moments together, and less overlap in creative circles. To outsiders, nothing appeared wrong. But behind the scenes, Brooks was reassessing who truly understood the purpose of satire. For him, comedy was born from survival, from pushing back against power. When humor became didactic, he felt something essential was being lost. Age and legacy also played a role. Brooks had lived through eras where censorship, blacklisting, and cultural fear were real threats. He carried a deep skepticism toward any movement, even well-intentioned ones, that narrowed the space for irreverence. Reiner, shaped by a different moment in history, embraced the idea that comedy and activism could walk hand in hand. Their disagreement wasn't personal at first. It was generational. Brooks rarely expressed this conflict openly. Instead, he defaulted to humor, deflection, or silence. But those closest to him noticed a shift. He spoke less frequently about Reiner, avoided political groupings he once attended, and grew increasingly protective of his creative independence. What he feared most was not disagreement. It was being absorbed into a narrative that didn't reflect who he was. Over time, admiration gave way to emotional distance. Not bitterness, but separation. Brooks believed relationships should allow room for contradiction and mischief. When that room shrank, he stepped back. This decision was not dramatic, but it was deliberate. At 99, reflecting on that choice, Brooks appears less amused and more candid, suggesting that silence was never agreement. We'll explore how specific moments and public shifts widen the gap between Brooks and Reiner, and why that distance became permanent. As the years passed, the quiet distance between Mel Brooks and Rob Reiner became more noticeable, not through public conflict, but through absence. They no longer appeared together in the way Hollywood expected two ideological allies to do. For Brooks, this separation was intentional. He had reached a point in his life where protecting his voice mattered more than maintaining appearances. One of the defining shifts came as Hollywood itself changed. Comedy, once driven by irreverence and risk, began to feel more cautious. Brooks watched as boundaries narrowed and jokes were increasingly evaluated through political and moral lenses. While Reiner leaned into this new environment, Brooks grew uneasy. He felt comedy was being asked to apologize before it even spoke. Those close to Brooks recall him expressing concern that humor was losing its edge. He believed satire should offend systems, not reassure audiences. In private conversations, Brooks questioned whether modern comedy still had room for contradiction, or whether it was becoming a tool for reinforcing accepted narratives. These were not complaints made loudly, but reflections shared with trusted confidants. Reiner, on the other hand, embraced the role of cultural commentator. His public statements grew sharper, his political engagement more visible. To Brooks, this represented a shift from storytelling to instruction. He respected Reiner's right to speak, but he resisted being associated with a voice that he felt constrained. Comedy rather than liberated it. This ideological gap widened during moments of heightened cultural tension. While many entertainers chose sides publicly, Brooks remained selective. He had lived through periods when choosing sides carried dangerous consequences. That history informed his reluctance. He did not believe silence meant indifference. He believed it meant independence. The result was a slow unraveling of mutual alignment. Invitations went unanswered. Joint appearances stopped. Industry insiders noticed, but no one spoke openly about it. Brooks preferred it that way. He had always believed that creative separation was healthier than forced unity. At 99, Brooks reflects on this period without resentment. His words suggest disappointment rather than anger. He seems less concerned with who was right and more with what was lost, a shared understanding of comedy's role as a disruptor, not a guide. In choosing distance, Brooks protected what he believed comedy stood for, even if it meant letting go of relationships that once felt aligned. We'll examine how Brooks' reflections have been interpreted by those around him, and why his late-life honesty has reignited conversation about artistic freedom in Hollywood. As Mel Brooks entered the later years of his life, his reflections began to carry a different tone. The sharp wit was still there, but it was layered with something quieter, a sense of evaluation rather than reaction. When he spoke about the state of comedy, people listened more closely. Not because he was attacking anyone directly, but because he was speaking from nearly a century of lived experience. And in that context, his subtle remarks about Rob Reiner took on new meaning. Those close to Brooks noticed that he no longer laughed off questions about creative differences. Instead, he framed them as lessons. He spoke about the responsibility of artists to protect the freedom of expression, even when it becomes uncomfortable. Without naming names, he emphasized that comedy loses its soul when it becomes predictable, obedient, or afraid of backlash. To many listeners, it was clear who and what he was referring to. Industry insiders began revisiting the Brooks-Reiner relationship with fresh eyes. What once appeared to be a natural drifting apart now looked more like a philosophical split. Brooks had always used humor as a shield and a weapon, a way to confront darkness without becoming consumed by it. Reiner, shaped by a different era, seemed more comfortable using entertainment as a platform for clear moral positioning. Neither approach was inherently wrong, but they were no longer compatible. Brooks' honesty resonated with a generation of comedians who felt creatively restricted. Younger performers began citing him as proof that comedy should remain unpredictable and fearless. His late-life comments, though measured, were seen as a defense of artistic independence. In this light, the distance from Reiner was not personal rejection. It was a boundary drawn in service of principle. What makes this moment especially striking is Brooks' lack of bitterness. At 99, he speaks without urgency or need for validation. He is not trying to rewrite history or settle scores. Instead, he is clarifying his own position, something he avoided doing for decades out of respect and restraint. That clarity has sparked renewed discussion about whether Hollywood still allows space for dissenting voices, even among those who share similar values. For Brooks, the truth was never about conflict. It was about alignment. When alignment disappeared, he chose quiet separation over public disagreement. That decision preserved his sense of self, even if it left questions unanswered for years. Now, with time having softened the edges, he seems comfortable acknowledging that not all friendships survive changing philosophies. Observers note that Brooks' reflections carry an underlying sadness not for the disagreement itself, but for the cultural shift it represents. He mourns a time when comedy could challenge everyone equally, without being sorted into ideological camps. His words suggest a longing for creative spaces where disagreement didn't automatically mean division. As these reflections circulate, they reshape how people view both men. Reiner remains influential and outspoken. Brooks remains revered and independent. Their paths diverge not because of betrayal, but because of different answers to the same question. What is comedy meant to do? We'll explore how Mel Brooks' late life honesty reframes his legacy, and why his quiet truth about Rob Reiner may be one of his most important statements yet. Mel Brooks' reflections at 99 offer a rare glimpse into how a lifetime in Hollywood shapes perspective. His decision to finally speak candidly about Rob Reiner is less about settling scores and more about preserving the integrity of his own creative journey. After decades of deflecting questions with humor, he now addresses the philosophical differences that quietly shaped their relationship. What emerges is a portrait of two legendary figures who shared respect but diverged in approach, vision, and priorities. Brooks emphasizes that comedy is a fragile art form, one that thrives on risk, irreverence, and the ability to surprise. For him, Reiner's style, particularly in later years, reflected a commitment to clarity and messaging, which occasionally conflicted with Brooks' vision of satire as a disruptive, untethered force. This difference was never personal. It was structural, rooted in their distinct understandings of what entertainment should achieve. Brooks' honesty about this divergence highlights the importance of creative boundaries. Even among friends and collaborators, the significance of Brooks' statements goes beyond the Reiner relationship. They underscore a broader truth about Hollywood. Relationships, even between the most talented and admired figures, are shaped by philosophy, temperament, and timing. Longevity in the industry does not guarantee alignment. Personal principles often outweigh public perception. Brooks' willingness to articulate this lesson at 99 provides valuable insight into the realities behind the glamour and humor. Equally important is Brooks' tone. He speaks with neither bitterness nor nostalgia, only clarity and reflection. There is no attempt to diminish Reiner's achievements nor to exaggerate disagreements. Instead, Brooks presents an honest account of the natural course of a professional and personal relationship, shaped by decades of experience. His candor offers both respect for Reiner and fidelity to his own principles. Brooks' late-life honesty also redefines his legacy. Beyond his unparalleled contributions to comedy and film, it illustrates the courage to remain authentic. By addressing these differences openly, he demonstrates that even legendary careers are guided not just by success and acclaim, but by decisions to honor personal values, even when that means creating distance. For audiences and future entertainers, this is as instructive as any film or performance. Finally, Brooks' story is a reminder of the human side of Hollywood legends. Fame, creativity, and influence coexist with disagreement, reflection, and personal boundaries. In choosing to speak now, he bridges the gap between public myth and private truth, offering fans a nuanced understanding of relationships shaped by artistry, principle, and time. Mel Brooks' decision to reveal his perspective on Rob Reiner at 99 is more than a revelation. It is a testament to the importance of integrity in art and life. It reminds us that even the brightest stars face moments when personal truth and professional respect must coexist, sometimes in harmony, sometimes at a distance. And in telling this truth, Brooks secures a legacy not only of laughter but of honesty, courage, and unwavering dedication to the creative spirit.